The story begins with the sound of someone singing along the shore. Two kids are playing there with a kite. The boy, Tony, runs to his mother with it. He tells her that his sister, Evie, breaks things, and he doesn't want to share with her. The mom, whose name is Jen, yells to Evie that she should not go into the water, so she runs to join them. As Jen is walking away, she tells her daughter to listen to Tony, for he is in charge. Evie repeats the same words her mom is saying, which shows how often Jen tells them to her daughter. Jen instructs her not to talk to strangers. Before she walks away, she yells to her kids that they have 10 more minutes to spend at the beach. Left alone, Evie hears whispers from the water. She starts walking along the rocks, and we see a figure moving fast inside a cave. The girl keeps walking until she finds something in the water. It is a wooden necklace she decides to wear. Once she returns to her brother, he asks her where she was, but she doesn't answer. At home, while Jen is combing Evie's hair, she asks about the necklace the girl found. Evie says it's hers, and no one else can have it. The mother wants to see the necklace, but Evie slaps her out of anger. The necklace is hers, she repeats. Jen doesn't do anything to such a misbehaving child. As the girl lies in bed at night, she mouths something that can't be deciphered. Just then, a shadow moves past her. On another day, the family sits inside a church. The priest, Father Robert, starts to give a sermon on the topic of forgiveness. He says it is central to their lives and their faith. Evie starts to walk away from the sermon, causing Jen to grab her. However, the girl gets to have her way. Robert keeps talking, saying forgiveness frees the forgiven as well as the forgiver. To forgive is to live free. Not to forgive is to be dragged down and held captive by the past. In the meantime, Evie places flowers on a grave outside the church. They are for Lily Lavinia, who went missing in 1835. Her tombstone also states, "She is missing but never forgotten." After church, Jen looks for her daughter outside. She yells out to her from a distance, seeing Evie walk towards the water. At home, Jen throws a towel at her, perhaps because she got wet. They look at each other in uncomfortable silence. The discomfort is especially apparent in Jen. As she sleeps, Evie keeps mouthing words that are unintelligible. Later, Tony wakes up and shines his flashlight to see Evie, standing near the foot of his bed with her head creepily lowered. When she walks away, he throws the flashlight in frustration. She returns to her room, where she watches static on the television. Something odd is certainly going on with her. On a different day, Evie arrives at a museum. The orator there talks to schoolchildren about the Vikings. As the kids sit and listen to her, Evie is on her own, exploring the museum. We still hear the words of the orator in the background. She says Britain was always vulnerable to an attack from the Vikings throughout its history. Then she speaks of the Selkie, the Irish equivalent of the mermaid. Folklore says that on one of the Viking raids, the brave men of the village fought against their enemy with everything they had, but they were outnumbered and beaten by the force of the invaders. The Vikings destroyed everyone who resisted them. As the lady keeps talking, Evie walks in there to continue the story for her. This unusual happening makes all the kids turn to look at her. She says the boat lurched one time and was gone. Only the women who swam ashore were saved, yet one of them was sacrificed to join the Selkie and her sisters in the ocean forever. Later, one of the schoolgirls calls Evie a freak. She also empties her backpack onto the floor, prompting Evie to slam her against the wall. Afterward, she sits with her mother, who gets called to have a discussion with the orator. We get a brief image of the chaos Evie created. She gets called a disgrace by the orator. Soon we see all three of them in a room. The orator talks to Jen possibly about Evie's misbehavior. We don't hear what they talk about. At home, Jen argues with her husband. It's a mystery what they are arguing about. We are meant to simply observe the drama of these happenings, without knowing the specifics of what they are about. Then Tony calls his sister freaky too. He quickly hides in his room before she can get to him. The next scene has the family in church, listening to the sermon. Evie gets up to walk away again. This time, her father grabs her, but the determined girl escapes anyway. She returns to say something to the priest that we don't hear. Whatever it was, it makes Jen approach her daughter to slap her. Her dad carries Evie away. Following this, we see a lady arriving at her job. She clumsily bumps into a trash can on her way to her desk. Once she gets to it, the lady is revealed to be Evie many years later. She answers the phone, and we learn she works at an insurance firm. However, the person on the other line sounds like her boss, criticizing her for being late. After the phone conversation, Evie's friend, Selma, scoots closer to her and inquires if Evie had a bad night. She says she can handle the nights. It's the mornings that are unbearable. As the ladies talk about personal matters, their boss exits his office, which prompts them to pretend like they were working this whole time. At her house, Evie uses a dating app while lying in a bathtub with water. She passes a man named Jeremy, only to return to look at him. Soon she puts her phone down and submerges into the water. Moving along, Evie is now on a date with Jeremy. She tells him she doesn't have any family. She was adopted. Jeremy thinks that is exotic. He wants to know the story behind her adoption, and she rudely tells him not to pry in her business. Elsewhere, a man named Tony tries to call Evie. His name sounds familiar. Switching to the lady, she is busy with her date partner. As she sleeps, she has a nightmare of being drowned. She wakes up screaming and scares Jeremy. Waking up in the morning, Evie sees he is no longer there. He probably didn't want to stay with a troubled lady like her. Later, she walks outside with Selma. Evie says she has accepted being alone. She also says she received a letter from the adoption agency. It stated that Tony had acknowledged the receipt of her letter and was willing to contact her. Selma asks if she remembers anything about him, to which Evie answers she thinks she does. She is very nervous. In the distant past, we watch her walking inside her house at night. When she opens a door, she sees her dad lying bloody in the bathtub. The next thing we see is her standing outside with Tony, while police sirens blare in the background. Back in the present, Evie talks to someone on the phone. She says she would be very interested in meeting Tony. Later, we watch a man walking to a location. He eventually comes to Evie and tells her he is Tony. She stands up to hug him, allowing us to see the man. Evie looks normal, whereas her long-lost brother has a look of unease. At a restaurant, she gives him a few details about her life. He also shares some information. His sister is amazed he has a boat. Tony looks like he has had a hard life. Evie says she imagined and idealized this moment for a long time. Now that it is here, she does not know what to say. He asks her the big question, if she is happy. She doesn't know what to say to that, so he presses her with the question again. Evie answers it by asking if anyone is happy. She learns he does not work because he struggled after what happened. When she tries to touch his hands, he pulls them away out of discomfort. He says he is writing novels, a revelation that amazes his sister. He has written 5 novels, but is self-published. He brought one of his novels for her. It is called The Selkie. When she sees the title, the ominous music sets in. Evie says she knows this story. Tony tells her she used to draw them all the time. Plus, she told him she had seen one. She replies she was just a kid. The man wants to know if she remembers what happened. We get a brief flashback of someone rushing to someone else in the ocean. Evie claims she remembers. Then he tells her the big news. Their father is still alive. The scene concludes with her looking shocked. Subsequently, she walks outside with Selma, who thinks it is odd. No one told Evie about what she learned from her brother. She thinks someone would have to have told her. She also asks what Tony was like, and Evie shares he was slightly strange. He isn't what she expected him to be like. She would not have even considered to be his friend if he were not her brother. During her time at work, Tony calls her. He tells her it was good to see her the other day. She feels the same way. He asks if she read his book, and the lady answers she hasn't gotten around to it. He wants her to know he wasn't entirely honest with her last week. He says he is at her house right now. Evie is shocked to hear this. He updates his statement to say, it's their house. She has a hard time responding to him. Thus, she asks if she can call him back and ends the call. Afterwards, she goes home, where she drinks alcohol. She gets a message on her phone from Tony. He tells her to come and stay with him. It has helped him remember how they were long ago. Seeing such a message makes Evie put her phone down before she tries to collect herself. In the next scene, she occupies a bar with Selma. She tells her friend she is a mess. She can barely sleep and can't keep a relationship for more than one night. On top of that, she drinks like a fish. Later, she drives until she arrives at her childhood house. Near the front door, she finds a note from Tony stating he has gone to the shop, so she uses this free time to look around the area. While she looks at the water, she hears a whisper. Soon her brother surprises her from behind. She follows him into the house, and we see a figure standing in the distance. Inside, Tony wants to show her around. Evie's expression communicates that something is not right. Of course, it could even be both. Later, she walks inside the house, remembering how she played in one of the rooms with her parents. They were all having a lot of fun, but now she feels uneasy. When the siblings are having a meal, she asks Tony what he plans to do with the house. He hasn't decided yet. We learn their father signed the property over to him, and she wonders why he didn't give it to her. Changing the topic to something more serious, Tony asks her what she remembers. She says she recalls their mom trying to drown them, and their dad attempting to end his life. She thought he succeeded. Tony asks if she remembers the day at the beach, which she does. This gives us a flashback of Jen taking her children there. She holds them tightly by their hands. making Evie say she is hurting her. The father is far away from them at that time. Hearing a scream, he starts to walk to the beach. He sees Jen taking the kids into the water and starts rushing to his family. We witness Jen attempting to drown both of her children at the same time. Thankfully, the man gets to them in time to drag the kids out to the shore. He goes back for his wife, but we don't see him taking her out. In the present, Evie says she knows their dad blamed her for her misbehavior. Tony tells her she should go see their dad. What troubles her about his proposition is that the man gave them away. At midnight, she asks Tony if he blames her for what their mother did. He doesn't get a chance to answer because something suddenly slams into the window. He goes outside and retrieves a lifeless bird. Later, they stand outside, and she tells him she used to leave the window open in the summer to hear the waves crashing during childhood. Tony is interested to know if she misses having a family. She thinks she accepted everything that happened after the incident as a normal continuation of her life. She believes she was too young to know it wasn't normal. Tony learns his sister was shuffled through many places. She went through illegal substances, alcohol, and some very bad relationships. Tony, on the other hand, was adopted into a nice middle-class family of primary school teachers. He played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. During bedtime, Evie drinks a decent amount of alcohol straight from the bottle. Following this, she gets dragged somewhere with a bloody face. It's uncertain what this episode is. It could be a memory or a nightmare. Soon she sits and smiles, despite the blood. Come morning, the lady descends to the first floor, where she finds none other than Father Robert. Tony asks his sister if she remembers him, and she does. Robert tells her she still looks like the Evie he remembers. When she is left alone with the priest, he says Tony told him what she went through. He starts giving her priestly advice, causing the lady to get annoyed. She tells him she will be sure to visit the church, but Robert keeps his calm, telling the troubled Evie he is there if she needs him. She sarcastically replies that he certainly saved her from a life of sin thus far. Once Tony returns, Robert stands up to leave. Tony says the priest has been a great help, to which she angrily replies she is very happy for him. He also says Robert has been visiting their father, whose life is diminishing. Later, Evie remembers seeing her dad lying in the bloody bathtub. He suddenly awakens, causing her flashback to end abruptly. She decides to visit the church alone. She tells Robert she is sorry about her rudeness earlier. He shows her where her parents used to sit, and she starts crying. After she sits in their place, Robert says he knows her father loved her. Yet because of what happened to her mom, life became too hard for him. He is not the man he was, and he's certainly not a monster. He was simply incapable of taking care of two children. The reason wasn't due to him not loving them. Evie thanks the priest for his helpful words. The next scene has her barging into her childhood house and telling her brother that she will go if he does. So we soon see them sitting in the hospital's waiting room. A patient walks into the room, behaving crazily. He approaches the siblings while committing self-destructive acts. Thankfully, he gets taken away by a staff member, but he should have never been let out from his area. In a short time, the siblings get to see their dad. They sit beside him and look at the man they haven't seen in over 20 years. He lies disabled in bed, with an oxygen mask supporting him. Turning to his son, he affectionately puts his hand on Tony's face. Tony says it's good to see him. When he turns to look at his daughter, he takes off his oxygen mask to tell her to get out. With a bruised heart, she rushes out of the room. She returns to the church, looking determined. Robert asks her if she remembers what she has done, before falling to the floor, where he defends himself from Evie with his crucifix. An unnatural darkness exists in the building, which seems to be caused by her. However, Robert gets the darkness to vanish. She just worriedly looks at the priest and runs away. When Evie comes home, Tony gives her the horrible news that their father passed away. He follows these words by punching her unconscious. Afterward, we see Tony on his boat. His sister is with him, eventually waking up. He says he is sorry about what he did, but it was necessary. Realizing she is restrained, she asks him why he did it. The man replies she needs to know. He talks about the tragedy of the family's love being replaced by lifelessness, madness, and addiction. He also thinks the tragedy not being her fault is nonsense. Evie tells him she thinks about their parents every day. She missed Tony too, saying she loved him. She reminds him of what he shared with her, that he continued to receive love from his adoptive parents, whilst she had nothing like it. This makes him scream he didn't have anything. He had a life of mistreatment and pain. He had to live through what no child should have to live through. Tony wants his sister to know he was shown love that had nothing to do with love. According to him, everything that happened to her, she brought it on herself. He tells her she knows what happened. Eventually, she gets thrown in the water. As this occurs, We go back to the distant past again to finally witness what truly happened on that disastrous day. When Jen was at the beach with her kids, they were playing and Jen was smiling. Nothing looked wrong with anyone. The screams the father heard were not screams of horror. They were just the screams of the children playing. The problem that took place had everything to do with the necklace Evie found. Once Tony took it from her, she demanded that he give it back. When he did not, she jumped on him and they fell. At this moment, their parents saw Evie drowning her brother. Jen rushed to save him, but Evie grabbed her face prior to pushing her into the water. Soon the father rescued both of his children. As he struggled to find his wife, Evie put on her necklace, while Tony anxiously watched her. Back in the present, Tony looks at the water and sees a large fish tail. We see the legendary Selkie swimming. Turning around, he sees Evie standing there. She stabs him with a knife, whispering that she remembers. He falls and tells her she will perish alone. We get our last set of revealing flashbacks, with the first one showing us that when Evie placed the flowers on the grave, a mysterious, grotesque woman was nearby. The bloody Evie we observed for a small moment saw a dark hand reaching for her. She also took the life of a man, probably Jeremy. The last flashback has her stealing a syringe at the hospital to inject in her dad. The grotesque woman is there too. She is the evil force responsible for all of Evie's crimes, and she entered the poor girl's life when Evie found the necklace. We also see a lifeless Robert lying in his church. Evie tells her brother she will never be alone as the grotesque woman stands near her. It is uncertain if Tony sees her, but it does not matter now because Evie takes his life. The final scene shows us a different family having a picnic at the shore. A young girl gets up to run to another location, where she collects the evil necklace. Like Evie, she instantly says it is hers.